The Wind River Canyon often delights and awes visitors and Wyoming locals alike. This scenic site, nestled between the towns of Shoshoni and Thermopolis, is a popular spot for tourists on their way to the national parks. At the southern mouth of the Wind River Canyon sits Boysen State Park, the largest state park in Wyoming. Its reservoir, which is formed by Boysen Dam on the Wind River, stretches for 20 miles. The dam which currently stands is the second iteration of Boysen Dam. The original was built by Asmus Boysen, and he encountered many difficulties during his time in the canyon. In fact, Boysen once remarked, quote, "When I arrived in Wyoming, I had so much money I thought it impossible to spend it in my children's lifetime, and now I've gone broke in this canyon." Welcome to the Rediscover the Winds podcast, a podcast by the Fremont County Museums. With museums in Du Bois, Riverton, and Lander, the Fremont County Museum System is committed to collecting, preserving, and interpreting the stories of Fremont County and the Wind River area. The unique artifacts found at our museums relate the history of central Wyoming with information which, in many cases, can't be found anywhere else. With the Rediscover the Winds podcast, we hope to bring some of that history to you, wherever you are listening. Last episode, we explored the story of lodging in Du Bois. We looked at the early hotels and dude ranches as well as the more modern motels and campgrounds. We investigated how the allure of the Old West drove people then and now to Du Bois. We explored how interest in Yellowstone National Park and later Grand Teton National Park greatly contributed to tourism and a growth of lodging in the area. Further, we looked at how hotels also became social hubs for the community, with their dance floors, meeting spaces, and restaurants. This episode will continue with our theme of tourism and travel as we explore the story of Boysen Dam, Reservoir, and State Park. Asmus Boysen came to Wyoming a wealthy man. He had immigrated to the United States from Denmark sometime in the 1870s to 1880s. He lived in both Illinois and Iowa and had invested in banking interests in real estate, becoming a multimillionaire. He secured a large grazing lease from the Shoshoni and Arapaho tribes in 1899. In 1901, Boysen went on a mining exploration trip and visited the Wind River Canyon. At the time, copper and gold were being mined in the area. Boysen created the Asmus Boysen Mining Company of Thermopolis and Chicago and held mineral land leases on the Wind River Reservation, originally called the Shoshoni Reservation. At the time, it was the largest corporation ever created in Wyoming. Whilst in the canyon, Boysen realized that without electricity, there was no easy way to mine ore in the area. Hence, the idea of a dam was born. In the early 1900s, Boysen began building a dam in the canyon. He believed that the dam and its power plant would produce enough power for all mining ventures in the area, and that power could be delivered to towns nearby like Shoshoni and Riverton. Boysen also thought the water held by the dam could be used to help develop agriculture in the area by providing a water source for irrigation. Boysen obtained the land for the dam through negotiations with the U.S. government. His original mineral land leases with the Shoshoni and Arapaho tribes were voided when sections of the reservation were opened for white settlement with the 1905 McLaughlin Agreement. In exchange for his original agreements, Boysen was allowed to select 640 acres. This included lands near the southern mouth of the Wind River Canyon, where Boysen would eventually build his dam. However, Boysen ran into conflicts with reservation authorities, including Henry Wadsworth, superintendent of the Shoshoni Reservation, and locals. There was a significant disagreement between Boysen and Wadsworth about the privileges Boysen had been granted on the reservation. Boysen argued that he was given 640 acres and was able to prospect anywhere on the reservation in the whole time leading up to its opening. Wadsworth disagreed and blocked Boysen and his employees from entering the reservation. It should be noted that this was Wadsworth's job. He was tasked with keeping settlers and non-tribal members off of the reservation until they were legally allowed to enter. Boysen later filed a court injunction against Wadsworth for blocking his entry. Additional stir was caused amongst the locals as Boysen and his employees were the only white men, besides government officials, that were allowed on the reservation prior to it officially being opened. Local people were angered about Boysen's so-called invasion and were dismayed that he was able to prospect and choose whatever lands would be most advantageous to him and his company without competition. In fact, a piece of Boysen's mining equipment, a diamond drill, was blown up in 1905. Boysen and his company also got in some hot water in May of 1906 when it was reported that Boysen employees were jumping other miners' claims on Copper Mountain. However, by 1905, the U.S. government had stepped in. The Natrona County Tribune reported that U.S. Attorney General William Henry Moody had rendered an opinion in Boysen's case and clarified his privileges on the reservation. Quote, Boysen has the right to select 640 acres in lieu of privileges he had held under the Indian leases and gave him further right to go upon the original 180,000-acre strip and prospect. He is given the right to select 640 acres 30 days ahead of others who might desire to settle. Secretary Hitchcock has instructed Boysen to keep off until May 15, 1906. As such, Boysen was not allowed to prospect anywhere he wished on the reservation, nor was he allowed to enter the reservation for the whole time prior to the opening. Boysen selected his 640 acres, which included lands at the southern mouth of the Wind River Canyon, where he planned to build his dam. The dam itself was a massive undertaking. All of the heavy machinery was brought in by rail to Shoshoni, which was the nearest train depot, and then taken an additional 14 miles by 4 and 6 mule and ox teams to the construction site. Much of the building was done in the winter to avoid high water conditions in spring and summer. Unfortunately for the workers, temperatures were recorded as being as low as -55, and massive boulders made construction difficult. In truth, Boysen's troubles had only just begun. The Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad, also known as the CBQ, desired to build a track through the canyon. They argued that they had the right of way as they had done survey work for the track. Boysen wanted to build a 50-foot dam and had poured the foundation for a dam of that height. In 1908, during the build, CBQ sued Boysen to try to, quote, restrain construction of the dam. The railroad argued that the dam's construction would force the railroad to change their initial survey, quote, making a steeper grade and entailing much expense. Trying to quell tensions between CBQ and Boysen, the state engineer, Clarence Johnson, told Boysen that his dam could only be 35 feet high. By 1908, the steel and concrete dam was finished and had created a lake. Inside the base of the lake was a power plant with turbine water wheels, and at the end of the dam, generators had been installed. 3 years later, on November 7, 1911, Boysen Dam delivered 30,000 volts of electricity to the towns of Riverton and Shoshoni. But this achievement would not mean blue skies ahead for Boysen. Whilst Boysen did build the 35-foot dam, he added a superstructure, a trestle, where a wagon bridge connected the roads on each side, making the dam at least 50 feet tall. The railroad pressed the state to sue Boysen for not following the permit, and they did. In 1909, the state sued Boysen, quote, for the removal of all structures above 35 feet, but the case did not go to trial until 1913. In 1911, the railroad did come through the canyon. Ironically, the line was built faster and at a reduced cost due to the CBQ's use of electricity generated from Boysen Dam. However, the cost of building the dam was far beyond what was expected, and lawsuits dragged on. One case between CBQ and Boysen about the removal of the dam was in the courts from 1906 to 1932. Further, the initial estimate for the dam was $160,000. The total cost of the dam was closer to $386,000, and this did not include the cost of the power generating equipment used in the power plant. Boysen sold some of his farms in Iowa, and his wife advanced him $200,000 by selling her 2,000-acre ranch. But Boysen's troubles did not end there. In 1912, heavy flooding washed out bridges and flooded railroad tracks, and another flood in 1921 led CBQ to file another lawsuit against Boysen, asking for the superstructure to be removed. Silt had also begun collecting behind the dam, leading to efficiency issues. Boysen agreed to open the floodgates in order to wash out the silt and help with flooding, but letting water out meant that less power was produced. Additionally, once Boysen was ordered to remove the superstructure, which reduced the height of the dam, once again, less power was generated. All of which amounted to less revenue coming in from residents in Shoshoni and Riverton who were buying electricity from the plant. By 1923, Boysen had brought in investors to help with costs and aimed to get the electrical plant to full production with renovations. As the renovations took place, Riverton and Shoshoni shifted away from the Bighorn Power Company and Boysen Power Plant, opting to receive power from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation's power plant at Pilot Butte. During this same year, another flood occurred in which Boysen's power plant was filled with silt, and, quote, it never ran again. Boysen went back to Chicago with much lighter pockets than he had come to Wyoming with. However, construction and development continued in the canyon. U.S. Highway 20, also known as Wyoming 789, began being built in 1922 and was finished 2 years later in 1924. This new highway through the canyon replaced the original route that ran over the Owl Creek Mountains. Further, the idea of a dam in the canyon lived on. While the majority of the original Boysen Dam was torn down around 1947 through 1948, parts of it are still present in the canyon today, and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation undertook the work of building a new dam in the canyon. The dam and power plant that exists presently were built from 1947 through 1951. The new dam is positioned upstream from the original, which allows the silt in the Wind River to settle before reaching the power plant. The cost of the second iteration was estimated at $7 million, but the total bill was around $28 million when construction ceased. This new dam site, while advantageous for silt issues, required telephone lines, 2 highways, and 2 railroads to be moved. The task of rerouting 13.5 miles of CBQ track proved quite a feat. A tunnel was built running underneath the new reservoir so that during seasons of high water, the train would travel 1.25 miles underground at a depth of 42 feet. Around the same time when construction on the new dam began, a bar, privy, and cafe were opened nearby. These businesses were utilized by construction workers as well as locals and tourists passing through the canyon. These establishments were aptly named the Dam Bar, Dam Cafe, and Dam Privy. These buildings were first used as housing for the original Boysen Dam workers in the early 1900s. Barney Smith refurbished them and ran these establishments. Smith was related to the notable Farlow family. Albert Stubb Farlow, a cowboy and rodeo rider, is noted as the inspiration for the bucking horse and rider image used on Wyoming license plates. Smith catered to a variety of his clientele's needs. Meals were served, groceries and gas were available, and Smith was able to cash the checks of the construction workers. Smith also was involved in some less than legal enterprises. The tunnel of the Wind River Canyon was known as a gambling hotspot, and there are rumors that Smith operated poker games and slot machines out of the Dam Bar. Another interesting facet of this enterprise was that there was a speaker installed in the women's bathroom that connected to the bar. As the story goes, Smith, quote, ran a speaker wire from inside the bar underneath the highway to the outhouse. He had a microphone in the bar. When a lady would stop and use the facilities, he'd pick up the microphone and say something like, "Hey, I'm working down here," and they'd almost always get in their car and drive away. The Dam Bar, Cafe, and Privy waned in popularity in the late 1950s. A fire in August of 1963 destroyed the buildings, but some of the foundations are still visible. The new dam was named for and dedicated to Asmus Boysen on August 1, 1952. The dam produces water for irrigation, quote, helps control flooding, reduces river silting, and generates low-cost hydroelectric power, finally achieving many of the same goals Boysen originally had. The dam also created the modern-day reservoir, which is the 4th largest in Wyoming. This reservoir has been home to a wide variety of recreational activities over the years, eventually becoming a state park in 1956. While camping, hiking, and boating can be enjoyed, fishing is a true treat for locals and visitors alike. The Boysen Pike Derby started in 1951, and Boysen is known, quote, as Fremont County's crown jewel of ice fishing. The reservoir has many different types of fish, including game species like walleye, sauger, perch, ling, rainbow, cutthroat, and brown trout, largemouth bass, bluegill, stonecat, black bullhead, and more. Boysen Dam, Reservoir, and State Park are hallmarks of Fremont County. The original dam is a story of hardship after hardship, and despite best intentions, Asmus Boysen was never able to bring his project to lasting success. His idea to build a dam in the Wind River Canyon, however, proved enduring. The communities surrounding the Wind River needed water for agriculture and power, even if it took another 40-plus years to get there. The Reservoir and State Park have created an attractive place for recreation. So, as you find yourself driving through the canyon, either as a local or a visitor just passing through, you might see the remnants of Boysen's project, the old railroad tunnels, incredible geology, and understand that the Wind River Canyon is flooded with stories. That's it for this episode of the Rediscover the Winds podcast. Next episode will focus on Sinks Canyon as we continue with our theme of tourism and travel. Rediscover the Winds, a Wyoming history podcast, is supported in part by funding from Wyoming Humanities and the Wind River Cultural Centers Foundation. The WRCCF is a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping Fremont County museums preserve our Wyoming and Wind River cultural and natural history by directly supporting the efforts of the Du Bois Museum, the Pioneer Museum in Lander, and the Riverton Museum. To learn more, visit www.windriverccf.com and help us conserve our past while enriching our present. Thank you.